Okay, this is the, oops, I got the wrong one. CSSU Board of School Directors regular meeting for April 14th, and we're getting started at 5:10. Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
Yes, there is one.
Yeah.
So if we could move 4.0 to 5.2, it'll just be a report to the board.
Okay.
Then I'll explain that when we get there.
And is there any reason to have an executive session tonight? Okay, let's start that. Okay, then audience and communications, Mr. Riffraff, would you?
What a nice thing.
Sorry.
Politely decline.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Okay, let's see, then we're on to 5.0, reports to the board, Colt report.
So let us start with turning our gaze to the gentleman to our right over here, who has been with us in Chittenden South for 12 years, through thick and thin, through miles and miles, and has served us incredibly well all that time, and is now moving on. And this will be his last meeting with us. And I think that I speak for every single person who works with you, those who are here, those who aren't here, that Mike, you have been incredibly supportive of everyone. People could depend on you, and we are very, very sorry to see you go. And I think it would be appropriate to give him.
Just trying to do the math in my head, how many budgets that would be.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
12 times 7.
They're all on the H drive for anybody who wants to take a look at
Oh, don't give her that opening.
them. She's been there and back.
Thank you.
Megan, do you want to say a little bit about the piece in your report around AYP and Green Mountain Star?
Yes, so this was that item that was on the agenda last month. We sort of snuck up on us a little bit. So there's a pretty detailed summary in there of the AYP report, even though there's lots of conversations about what will be the new plan that districts develop moving forward. We are still at this point bound by the AYP status that we're currently in. So 3 years ago, the SU needed to develop an AYP plan. The focus areas of that plan are really centered on the reshaping of our lead team, our principal leadership team, continuing data team work in our schools and how to support that, and our structures around MTSS. So we have been periodically entering our progress into Green Mountain Star, and are feeling really good about how our existing work aligns with what was in our AYP plan. So happy to answer questions about anything there.
When I read this, I might not have put this just right, but I actually don't know what Green Mountain Star is.
So Green Mountain Star is a software program that it's bigger than that. It's a company that the AOE contracted with called Industar, but Green Mountain Star is Vermont's version, and it included a long list of indicators that schools had to assess themselves against in order to develop our AYP plans. And the indicators are based on research around narrowing the achievement gap and, successful schools. So schools and CSSU self-assessed against the indicators, and now we use the software program to enter our progress and kind of keep track of things.
So can you give me an example of the indicator?
So yes, one of the indicators that's actually a required one for the SU is, and I don't have a specific language, although it's in there, is around the oversight of central office of monitoring the progress and support of kids who are struggling. So that's an indicator, is that successful systems have a level of oversight at the SU level. And so part of our reshaping of our leadership team is connected to that indicator. Does that help? There were, schools had to do 60-ish indicators. The SU, I can't remember how many we had to assess on. It wasn't quite 65, but 30 something. Yeah.
So an indicator could be anything from like systems kind of thing, a structural kind of thing, like Megan was saying, but it could also be, there are systems or interventions in place to address the needs of students in disaggregated groups who are not meeting performance standards in literacy, for example. So it covers that whole gamut.
Did all the schools have to do that, or just the ones who?
Just the ones who were identified, and it also,
Seems like a good exercise for.
Yes.
right, exactly.
It was a good exercise.
Yeah.
Because the.
AO sprung this on us in August, and then we needed to get going with it in August. And it's quite a process that you have to go through, but we certainly, as soon as we got into the process, said, you know, notwithstanding the way they roll this out, it is a good process, and it does help you really understand the entire system and focuses everyone's energies in the same way.
Kristen, pretty much every school in the state is now qualifies under AYP. Yeah,
By design.
except for those schools who last year piloted the SBEC, so there weren't reliable scores by which to measure whether or not they met AYP or not. And that's a sprinkling of schools. So by and large, the entire state is under improvement.
I call it the entire state is under continuous improvement, which we all should want to be.
Right.
Any other questions for me? Cindy, might you want to share the new nomination form that you've been working on?
I don't have it for you in the packets because Kathy Dillon's making it attractive and actually readable. But based on some feedbacks we've received from the board over, particularly the last year, but certainly over a couple of years, we are updating the teacher nomination form that you all get in your packets. We include a little more information such as how many applicants there were, how many were interviewed, how many were moved on to the second round, what the search committee was composed of, just some more of the information you've all been looking for, as to kind of walk you through the process on a 1 to 2 page document of how we got to the recommendation we're making. So hopefully you will see that in your May board packets for any nominations you get there. And Jeff, congratulations, you just found out there's a new nomination form. That one's still good. You're still good. So once you get it, if there's still things that you would like to see, let your board chair know, and that information will get back to me.
Cindy, I was a little confused on one part of the Colt report. It said that there's that our student day will be 7 hours long at all our pre-K to 8 schools. And then later, when you're talking about the memorandum of understanding about interpretation of teacher collective bargaining agreement, it says the length of teacher contract day is 7.5 hours for student days. So is it 7 or 7.5 or 7
The
o'clock?
student day is 7, the teacher day is 7.5.
Okay,
K-8.
got it.
The high schools, the teachers are still on the same thing, but we don't try and tell you how long the student day is in the high school. Because if you had early block, late block, and every other block, it gets very,
So the student day is 7.5.
no, the
Yes,
student day is
that's-
7 students.
And
It's 7.
for students, it's 7.
Don't you stay half an hour?
Generally, we like the teachers to get there before the students.
And it may not seem like a huge significant thing, but it is a huge significant thing.
The man sitting behind the trash garden.
So just for context, my understanding in reading the report that this was a clarification. Is there any change from what the status quo was previously? And if so, can you explain the difference?
This new contract that you all ratified this fall had new language about a 7.5 hour teacher day. As it rolled out, you can imagine with 26 different administrators and 400 something different teachers, there was a lot of different interpretations of what that meant. So Lisa and I felt the best thing to do was to sit together and tell everybody what that meant. So we actually used the side letter that was developed for the SPARK program to be the foundation for how we calculated how those minutes would be allocated. And so now, instead of talking about number of sections or number of students people have, we're talking about the number of assigned minutes.
And is that assigned minutes a change from what it was a year ago, or is it essentially the same? It reflects what it has been.
It depends on the school. It's anywhere from no increase to a 15-minute increase in the student day. And I think some of your principals would say that it's given them a little bit more. It gives them a place to point to that says, yes, I can direct you to do common planning time together, or it's not just about your time with students, but also for some of them, it's also addressing some inequities or perceived inequities in the systems around different teaching positions. It's the most concrete description of the teacher day we've had since I've been here.
And I understand why the high school student day might be hard to define, but is there a reason the high school teachers aren't?
They're not part of the side letter, but their day is 7.5 hours as well. When the subcommittee met, and Megan and Elaine may have to jump in and help me because that was in the 2 months of lost Cindy. Their day is defined by the number of blocks or assignments they have, so it's not as easy to quantify that. There's still language in the contract that allows Jeff to assign things once the prep period and lunch period have been assigned, but it's not been the same issue at the high schools it's been K-8.
For staff development, for example, we agreed, and this was a new agreement maybe last year or the year before, that those are 7.5 hours also, and that's K-12.
And just because we like to make this point, I'm not trying to imply that teachers work 7.5 hour days. Every teacher I know works a lot more than that, but that's their time that they can be assigned in the building.
Right.
That's the way I described it. That is their on-site time, not the time it takes them to do their job.
Right. That's a good way to say it.
Okay. And not even how long they're actually on-site for most of them.
That's true.
I have a question. Number 6, flexible work days is still available. Step up the improvement. But maybe I missed it, and maybe it doesn't need to be in there, but we have the flexible work day ability now on virtual agreement between the administrator and the teacher. Did that need to be addressed in there? Did we need to address it? Is it addressed? Just want to make sure we're not.
I believe I believe that's referring to the actual appendix in the contract, which is called transformational improvement plans. And so that's how we do those joint agreements between the teacher and the administrators. It has to come in under that plan. Yes. So, for example, Spark at Williston is technically is a transformational improvement plan. And we had to reach a side letter on that, and that side letter's actually been incorporated into the contract. So it could be for whatever purpose, but the teacher or the administration would offer up, hey, here's a need. The administration can't require it, but usually it's developed in partnership. Yeah. So yeah, it's a reference to a section of the contract.
And the section that it references describes how you would go about what the elements are of doing that.
Just from the verbiage, it sounded like if a teacher needed to be approved, we would do that. That's what I thought.
No, that's a different part of the contract.
that was.
Right.
Yes.
So it's a kind of a misnomer
Right.
that.
You know, I would just say that that's been in the contract for more than a dozen years.
Before I got
15, 20 years for sure, that's been in the contract. And at the time that it was put in the contract, last century, it really was to say, we encourage teachers and administrators to think creatively, innovatively, and here's a process that you can do that so that you're not going to be hamstrung by the 7.5 hours that's in another place in the contract. And in all of our schools, I think there have been those kinds of plans that have been laid out, even 15 years ago. Okay?
Cindy, questions? We should.
Molly, you want to extend an invitation to the board?
I would. My little note in the Cole report is about our mentoring program for new teachers, which has grown over the years to be a pretty strong, sturdy program that helps new teachers adjust to their school, the CSSU philosophy, our vision, our growth mindset, all of those things. And periodically through the year, new teachers meet and mentors of them meet so that they can do a better job with their mentoring, and there are many expectations of the program. But the short of it is, it all culminates, and I think some of you heard about this last year, with a colloquium in which our new teachers and sitting with their mentors sit together and mentees share a new growth over the year that was significant in their instructional practice. And it's a great event. You hear a lot about new learning and bringing new teachers into the fold, so it's a good feeling meeting. And I invite board members to attend. I think you'll really enjoy. They're asked to bring a piece of evidence, so you see people with their iPads and they're showing videos of a clip of a lesson or what have you. It's a really great event. So I invite you to attend on May 7th here at CVU Cafeteria from 3:30 to 5. And people will be at tables sharing, and you can rotate or find a seat or sit. They will be by school. You could sit with your school group, and I'll be sure you feel comfortable if you come.
Report. All right, we're at 5.2, which is professional development release time.
That's one thing with the report. There was a piece about kindergarten enrollment at Charlotte and some other school members. Do other schools, does each single school have its own demographer, or is there shared resources?
No, it's the same.
So it's one for everybody?
Right. Yes, we get a report for the whole SU. We get the numbers aggregated and disaggregated for each community. Professional development release time. So for the last 3 months, each board chair meeting, I've been discussing with the board chairs the possibility of bringing to this group and then to the local schools maybe it's a transformational improvement plan of sorts that would ask the board to consider doing early release for students once or twice a month in exchange for adding a couple student days. And the reason we would have been coming to you and asking you to do this is because the nature of the work that we do really has changed drastically in the last 10 years. Whereas, even 5 to 10 years ago, when we had an initiative to implement, here's the initiative, we know it's going to take this time to get smart about that initiative, and then we roll it out, it's done. And so if you do that in a couple days here, another day 3 months later, and another 2 days 3 months later, that's fine, that works. The work that we're asked to do today, and I blame functional FMRs for this, right? As soon as we could see what a brain was doing when it was learning, all of a sudden we got a whole lot smarter about what it is we needed to do in teaching kids, in adult learning, and all of that kind of thing. And the work that we're asked to do really isn't the work that lends itself very well to, let's pay attention to it for 2 days now, and let's just shut our door and go back to, seeing if we can implement that, and then coming back 3 months later and start all over again. It really is continuous learning. And so we thought that it might be better for the learning if we rolled it out over time. So I had conversations with the board chairs, and they weren't universally enamored with that. They had a lot of questions. They said we would need to know a whole lot more about that. We can see why it would be an important thing to do. So a committee of principals and Molly and I met a few weeks ago to kind of roll out, what would this look like? What would we be doing? Even starting to plug in, this is the work that we'd be doing. Here's what the school day would look like when we were doing this, and all of that. And like I said, this has been an iteration over several months. And then I met with the association last Wednesday. I had a 45-minute meeting with them here. And they have a lot of questions. And it's not just teachers, paras, what will the paras be doing, what does that do to the contract, that kind of thing. And what I came away from that with was, it's not quite ready. So I wanted to share as much as I've just shared with you today, because I think that I want to plant a seed that we're going to be coming back. Other schools are doing this. Burlington's been doing it for a few years. Chittenden East is embarking on this year. Montpelier, Rutland, South Burlington been doing this. Washington West, some of them for many years. And many years meaning like 5 years, 5 to 7 years. And I don't think it's because we want to get on the bandwagon. It's because they all know what I just shared with you. The work is different. And so we will be coming back, but I think it will be smart for us to take the time to really thoughtfully think about, from the teacher standpoint, what does this mean? For the high school schedule, what does it mean on white and red days if we're out every other week or that kind of thing? For parents, how can we assure them that there are activities for their kids? Are there ways that we can help with that? And so we're putting that on hold. We're going to have a committee. We're going to be an active committee, and you can imagine that at this time next year there will be a presentation on this. Not sure exactly what it will look like, because it's hard to say we're going to have a collaborative process and we're going to listen to people and tell you up front what the answer is going to be. But I just really do want to underscore, I still believe it's a good idea. It's just that it needed more work behind the scenes before. And that's a tricky thing, right? Because I felt that the work that needed to be done behind the scenes was with the board chairs. And it turns out maybe I should have been meeting with the association every month on that particular topic too.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I apologize for being late, but I didn't understand. What is the change?
There is no change.
What will propose?
The proposed change, which you might imagine that we would come to you next year, will be around early release for students.
Okay.
Let's say twice a month. Let's say on a Wednesday afternoon, the buses roll in at 1 o'clock, and then the teachers are in professional development.
So it's like a half a day. We've done this in the past.
Yeah.
Sounds like it.
Right, and we would add student days for that. So anyways, we will have conversations about this, and all of you, now that I've shared what we're thinking about, will be involved in the discussions.
Thank you.
Okay? And so consequently, go ahead, you go.
Sorry, this is probably like a really naive question in light of the previous conversation about how many minutes a person can be asked to show up to work, but this isn't something you can do for like 3 to 5, a couple of times a month?
Not really. I mean, we could do from 3 to 4. That's what we could do, 3 to 4. And 3 to 4 is, it's not enough time to dig into it. It really isn't.
And so
They would, but I mean, that's what we have now. Right now in the K-8s, many of our K-8s meet 3 to 4 every week, not twice a month, every single week. But there's so much stuff that happens in a school that to think that from that hour you're really going to devote it to professional development, it's not enough time to get going, and you're going to spend the time on what happened when, the TB thing happened, or the bomb scare, or the, lice, or whatever it is. Something happens that takes the focus away from the work. So by the time you get to the work, now you get 40 minutes. So I think that's what it is. I mean, it's just, but these are all questions that I think, these are things that we should be discussing over the next year and thinking about. And how do we do this? And how do we do the work in a meaningful way that makes us all smarter about the work we do that will have direct benefits on our kids? Because we're not doing this for the adults, really, we're doing this for the kids. So consequently, I am going to pass out the calendar that you will need to approve at your local meeting. See, this would have been the new calendar that we would have asked you to discuss. This is the calendar that you will discuss at your local meetings. This is the traditional calendar that includes 176 student days at the K-8, 177 at the high school. It includes the parent-teacher conferences and the professional development days. So, could I ask the board chair to make 2 extra copies for the other board members that will show up at your meeting?
Once they send out.
Yes, and maybe you got it. And we're not gonna discuss this now. This is for your local board discussion with action next month. Questions? Thank you.
Okay, 6.0 discussion to matter 6.1 policy.
Any questions?
Any questions? I could have said that. I don't have it in front of me, Cindy, but on the grade advancement retention one, it said something to the effect of, we have a procedure, and I'm just wondering, does schools actually have a written procedure to support this policy?
I know that both Jeff and John Turco, who sit on the committee, were able to very clearly articulate it if they don't have a written one, what their procedure is. My experience is that they're all pretty clear what their procedures are. I don't know that they're in written format. I'd have to ask each principal.
If you wouldn't mind, I think it's just something that would be good to be able to have consistently in the drawer rather than, well, last time we did this, especially with the principal turnover that we're experiencing. Any other questions on the policies? Okay, 6.2, calendar, last student day.
So this is on the agenda here for the SU for discussion only, make sure you understand it. It will be on your agendas for action tonight, and it is about the last day of school. So by law, you have to have 175 student days. So that means for CBU, their last student day is Friday, June 12th. Because they have 177 days in their calendar, they're good to go. If you choose, if the CBU board chooses to do that, they can waive the student days, they translate to teacher days. For Heinsberg, their last student day is Tuesday, June 16th, because they had an additional snow day, emergency day. Do you remember that day that you guys all had? So that's your option. You could go till Tuesday with students or Wednesday if you choose. That's going to be a discussion that you're going to have. But in Heinsberg, you have to go till at least Tuesday. For Charlotte, Shelburne, and Williston, the last student day, the 175th day, is Monday, June 15th. So your option is to end on Monday, June 15th with students, or if you want to go 176 days, you end on Tuesday, June 16th, and the additional days transfer to teacher professional development days. Any questions about that?
So that's different than in the packet.
Shouldn't be.
Are you looking at the right year?
The K one says last day is 12 to 15.
Yes.
That's before snow days.
Oh, should have.
Oh, this is like the 9:30 check.
Okay. So there are two in there. There's the original calendar and then what it looks like. You will notice on the previous calendar I gave you that we slotted in snow days. So that people just know. You know, if we have snow days, you're going to be done on this date. Parents know, everybody knows.
So, we still have the option of having graduation on.
We actually are asking people to do graduation on the traditional day. That's what I'm saying to the principals, so if that comes up. High school for sure, regardless. Lots of people travel for high school graduations, but honestly, in this SU, lots of people travel for 8th grade graduation. Grandparents come for 8th grade graduation. For us to change it at this point in the year doesn't make sense. So I'm saying Thursday, traditional date for grade 8 graduation, goes as planned. Those kids do not come back though after that. And that's not a problem in terms of attendance, so.
So the high schools, we're gonna be likely done on Friday in any case, right?
Yes.
And then
Unless we have another snow day.
Keep discounted this winter.
Just saying. Just saying.
Everyone else except Heinsberg has the option of, and they have to go on Monday.
And they could end on Tuesday.
And they could end on Tuesday. And Heinsberg has to go on Tuesday and they could end on Wednesday.
Exactly. So that's the discussion and action that we will take tonight.
Clear as a bell.
Good, perfect, thank you for that.
All the board chairs comfortable, they got that under control?
You have these wonderful people at your board meetings.
That's
also.
true, they've been practicing all day, right?
We had our planning meeting.
All right, we are on to 7.0 action matters, 7.1 personnel. To do separately, have a motion to accept the nomination for the building-based special education administrator as in your packet.
So moved.
Thank you, Kathy.
Second.
Thank you, Kevin. Any questions or concerns? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? The ayes have it. 7.1.2, nomination of one FTE one-year contract for special educator as in, to fill approved LOA request as in your packet. Have a motion? Accept. Thank you, Laura.
Second.
Thank you, everybody. Sandy, pick something. Any questions or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? The ayes have it. 7.2, can I have a motion to adopt the CSSU final 15-16 budget?
So moved.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Kevin.
Get this rolling.
Bob, anything you want to add? Did you say any questions?
Any discussion?
It's the same work that you finished in December, brought forth again for final approval.
And we thank the Charlotte community for passing their budget so that we do not have to go an alternate route on this one. Actually, interesting discussion for the future is what happens if there's a board that's not, that hasn't passed their budget at this point. But
So I have a process question. Why don't we approve this budget prior to town meeting day?
because it's dependent on the local budgets passing. In theory, I mean, if God forbid all 4 budgets went down, we'd probably be having a different discussion here about the SU budget.
Gotcha.
You know, the question is, if one budget goes down, would you reopen the whole budget? But that's fortunately a question we don't have to have today.
I think it is a question that we need to grapple with though, so that we're not in a position where we're having to decide at this meeting what to do. Because it is complicated. We've had a few emails going back and forth between Jean, Bob, and I this weekend around, okay, well, what would that mean? Is it just the pieces of that particular board that we opened up? Everything? How do you do that? So I think that it needs a conversation. We need to have a plan.
If we were red, we would.
Yeah, that's right. I know.
Unless
We
of
wouldn't
course
have
it then we would be having this discussion. Okay, are there any questions, serious questions about the budget before we go to exec?
I think Josh's question was a serious question.
Yeah, it was, I'm sorry. It was these questions I was so serious about. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? The ayes have it. Okay, Mike, now you can go to Florida.
That was humor.
We have mine. If I'm saying we can go, I'm not
He's
gonna
gonna laugh all the way down.
That's right. Okay, 7.3, affirmation of the kind of motion to affirm the VMERS offering to consolidate special ed support staff. Consolidate special ed support staff. I did read this over the weekend. I have a motion. Thank you, Kristen. Second? Second. Thank you, Kathy. Now, do you want to give us or Cindy, or whoever can give us the quick?
Cindy gets the coin flip on this one.
Okay.
Basically, under consolidation, we need you to approve adding the plans, adding the consolidated staff to the new plans. It does mean potentially for some schools, the increase from group A to group B, there's a % different employer contribution. And that is up to the employee. So they will have the opportunity to stay in A or go to B. We've been hopefully reasonably assured by the Office of the Treasurer that the employees should feel no different one system to the next. We're hoping.
And why is that for both the option for them to change?
Because when each of you entered the Vermont Municipal Employee Retirement System, you all set a different group. The group at CSSU is B. However, for those moving from the schools that are currently A, I believe it was part of the Act 153 language or subsequent laws to make sure that people were held harmless as a result of consolidation, so they have the option of staying in their current group. When they
Is it
move over.
correct to say the groups delineate different benefit levels for the retiring employee and different contributions leading up to retirement for both employer and employee? So it's a choice, but schools target what choices they're gonna provide for their employees. So
All
they're
of our
different.
systems offer A and C, or B and C, depending whether you're union or non-union.
And does the impact of that get separated by school, or is it sort of like all other special?
When I budgeted for the consolidated, I assumed everybody would be in B to put the board in the best possible position.
That is part of the spending pool, which is allocated on
Correct.
ADM, so one school could be A, another be B, but they're not gonna see it, because
You're not gonna see it.
we'll wait till the sidebar is complete. 'Cause Eric may have another good
Is that a
question.
grandfathered kind of thing, Cindy?
Yes, all new hires will automatically be in B.
So it's a temporary thing, but there are differences. As people leave, they just automatically get enrolled in B.
Correct.
We all set, Eric?
Sorry.
No, I appreciate the question.
I should probably just have kept quiet and abstained because my wife's
No, you still get to ask questions.
How I won't advise her on which group to be, that's outside of my scope.
All right, are we ready to vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Thank you, Eric. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Thank you, Kathy. Second, Lauren? Thank you, Lorna. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstains? Wow, okay. Confirmed next meeting date, May 19th is the regular meeting at 5 p.m. Right here. Don't forget the retreat on June 1st. Put this on everyone's calendars. And the business meeting on June 23rd. And with that, yeah.
Yes, yeah, that's the plan.
June 23rd is the business meeting. The only person I know who grows a beard in the spring. Maybe else shaves them
I'm gonna start.
Yeah, that was just last week.
Like the
Well,
point out Jim Henson had a beard year round.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I was just noticing the comment topic here does say
It's not easy
that
to
starts at
get
5:40, but I don't think we really let people know that, so I
Right.
think we'll,
So I could fill up some of that time.
all right.
Like, full question, quick question on the calendar. Next year, are we taking Columbus Day off?
We're not, we always take time off in October.
Yes, no, I know, I just.
That is a day off.
Okay, it just didn't get it full bracket, so I wasn't sure what we're. Okay, cool.
But actually, if it's gonna impact how the locals are gonna. Isn't that?
Can I just,
Yom Kippur?
hold on a second, if, I appreciate the conversations about the calendar, I think they're actually good to have, but we're gonna lose everybody if we, did you
Right.
wanna have this with everybody, or this other?
I think I wanna do this, but did you?
No, I just want, if I can just tell, if I can say it in local, that's fine.
Okay, so, I had the regional superintendent's meeting this morning, and Jeff Francis, who is the executive director of the Superintendent's Association, was there, and shared this testimony that was provided to Senate Ed last Friday afternoon. Bill Talbot was the Deputy Secretary of Education, is the one who provided the testimony, but this is really Rebecca's thinking. This relates specifically to all of the governance conversations that are going on. And obviously, the House has an aggressive bill around governance that they've now crossed over, and the Senate is starting to play with them. So Rebecca has rolled this out, and this is a pretty significant piece of information for you guys, I think you've got a committee that's going on perhaps governance. So what this would do, if they took her advice, is to, first of all, look at the guiding principles, make sure that there's equity and quality, and that that's all efficient use. So that's the use every dollar well piece. That it would support only unified pre-K-12 districts, whether you tuition, operate, or both, or either, and support fewer larger districts and fewer districts within SUs, if any SUs, and provide not only support for implementation, but pretty good carrot for doing the implementation. So the first one is around the yield language, and maybe you can explain that better, but instead of talking about per pupil cost, it's about what will $1 raise. Instead of base amounts, it's about what will $1 raise and how that translates to how much money you get. Shorten the tail on hold harmless is all about that there are schools in Vermont that are getting money for students who are no longer in their schools. And in some cases that could be like 30, 40 kids in a school of 100, just because of the way Act 60 and 68 was written. And remove small school support. So you can see right away they're including consequences that are going to encourage people to think about how much their schools are costing them. The second one is to support proactive efforts to create better options, and that is around the belief that pre-K-12 systems, and consider that a lot of times I say to you, we are successful because we behave as if we're a district. I feel like we do have a pre-K-12 system. We focus all our energies on making sure that all of our kids, pre-K-12, are getting a coherent, consistent program. Somewhere in here, I'm not sure if it's in this part, it takes any non-operating districts, like St. George, and says either join some other district or else we will lump you all together and you will be a district in the state. So you wouldn't, St. George couldn't exist the way they are now in our SU. It encourages people to do consolidation, and the incentive that it provides is 10 cents off your tax rate for 5 years. That's a huge incentive. That's a lot of money. That is a lot of money. And provides support for that. And would ask people who do that to consider being a pilot so that people could learn from it. They're also already learning from Chittenden East, that just consolidated, that they're realizing some cost benefits. So they're kind of using that as a model to say, here's what we could be doing. And the accountability piece, let me see, what was that about? So that's kind of the piece around, it's hard to really quantify what's going on in the state when we have 53 different ways of doing things. How do you compare? It's always apples to oranges. And if we had a system that was actually coherent, then we'd be able to make comparisons, see who really is doing good work, who's not, and kind of replicate that. On the very last page is where they talk about the mandatory consolidation of non-operating districts. And then the last piece, this one right here. Oh yeah, okay, I'll get back to that. So the very last piece on the last page is about doing quality reviews and what they would do to ensure that there is quality in every one of the systems. Bob just reminded me, I don't know how I've forgotten this, but if you look at the second page at the bottom, it also anticipates, if you stay as an SU, SU votes. So the public would vote on the SU budget. If the budget went down, you could keep trying to get it passed over and over and over again. And in the end, if you couldn't get the budget passed at some date certain, you would get 87% of last year's operating money. But think about that. So,
That could certainly keep people from moving things to the SU.
Well, what it's doing is trying to encourage people to be SDs.
SDs, right, but, or
Right.
just not do it at all and not save the money,
Well,
right?
there are some things that you have to do.
Mhm.
You have to have special ed at the SU. And that's a lot.
And what happens when special ed budget goes down?
No, exactly, that's what I mean. Right. So this is just testimony at this point, but I think that it's important for you to know that this is testimony at this point, because I think that Rebecca commands a pretty strong presence in the legislature. Would you say that? I mean, I think that people listen to her. She's smart, she's very much data-driven, and is very committed to making sure that there is equity and efficiency in the work that we're doing. So, that's all I know.
Well, I don't like that thing about the SU. That even says we need to figure out how to start dismembering the SU or commit to being an SU. There's no middle ground, and I'm not sure that that's the best path.
So good fodder for your committee.
I would agree.
This is the strategy committee.
There's another thing in there I forgot to say. If you do a red merger study, you know how we did a red merger study? If you have 3 out of the 4 that want to do it, the 3 form, and the 4th one is an orphan that is like sent off to somebody else.
Which wouldn't be a good thing for us here,
No.
especially if the orphan is the size of Williston.
Or any,
Does that happen in Huntington
well, this is,
then? That's prospectively, not for.
right, exactly. Right.
All right, more on that. Obviously, a lot happened in the next 3 weeks or so. 5 weeks?
Take every day you can get rid of it.
All right.
You want to make sure it's spring by the time you adjourn.
Okay, well, if everybody can take if they promise to take a 5-minute break and come back, then we can get started right at 7, okay?
6.
Right at 6.
7:06. Before we get started again, I was remiss in not introducing Mark McDermott, who's new to the CSSU board, the Charlotte board chair. So give him a round of applause for that. And Mark, right now you can say, well, I was chair, a Charlotte budget never went down.
Say that for
We won't use it.
I'd also like to introduce Adam Bunting, who's the new CBU principal, starting in July for us. And, you know, I see you bringing up the level. I'll have to start wearing suits to school. Welcome back. Okay, go ahead.
So I just want to say a couple words. The people who are going to be doing this presentation tonight are part of a group of 10 from Chittenden South who have been participating in a seminar with other Vermont school districts and supervisory unions around proficiency-based graduation requirements and PLPs. They've gone 2 days a month for 5 months and really focused on that during that time. But I want you all to know that they've done way more work than that. So they go 2 days a month, and imagine the work that's not done back at the ranch while they're doing this, they need to do. And then they're still focusing on this. So I want to personally, on behalf of everybody here, on behalf of all of our schools and our kids, say thank you for the really unbelievable work that you've done and how you've positioned us once again to be successful in all of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
And there are some others who are in the audience. Thank you.
We're going to get started, and you know that the common topic is all about proficiency-based learning as well as personalized learning, and we're going to hopefully tie the segue together for you around that. And like Elaine, we want to recognize our colleagues who participated in all of the learning that went into this, but also building this slideshow. Very much a collaborative effort, 11 people, and many of them are here, so we decided though that we wouldn't be jackrabbits all through the presentation and hop up and down. So it's just a few of us up here, but it doesn't mean that we're the only contributors. So thank you for that. So this evening, the core ideas that we hope you walk away with overall is a sense of familiarity, that you gain some level of understanding of proficiency-based learning, what that means, what the law is, as well as personalized learning plans, and what is involved in those to some extent. And you probably know that the emphasis on personal learning plans is really going to be honed in the local meetings tonight, so that we wouldn't have a 2-hour presentation for you, because it's a lot of information. And plus, they're being implemented in each local, and so there's more detail there about how that implementation will happen. So that you know, that emphasis really is going to be when we leave here and go to our locals. So Jeff's gonna step right up, and I didn't introduce people here, so you know this is Jeff Evans, you know I'm Molly, this is Megan Roy, and this is Bonnie Birdsall, the tech integrationist from Williston.
I'm the one being replaced by the guy who's much better dressed than I am. So, we have always heard in education the power of metaphor with learners. And so we developed a metaphor that we use with teachers to describe what proficiency-based learning is. And so if this were a room full of teachers or grad students or getting ready to teach like we spoke with a couple of weeks ago, we would start by asking you all to take out a piece of paper and draw a map of the route that you took from your home to here today. And so instead, imagine that you've got your GPS, whether it's on your phone or Garmin, whatever you use. GPS tells you where to go and how to get there. Sorry.
You'll be much
So imagine that you've done that. So you're at home and you've been told you've got to get the CPU. CPU is the target. Okay? That is what everybody is expected to, where everybody is expected to reach, the destination. But you're all starting in different places. And thus your routes are different. And the GPS is going to tell you how to get there most efficiently. And if you happen to get about halfway and a road is washed out, you're going to need a detour. And so what proficiency-based learning does is it says we've got to be really explicit about the target, the destination. And then it's the teacher's job, the educator's job with the student to develop that path, develop that route. And remember, it's going to take longer for some of you to get here than others because you're starting in different places. And it's also our job to anticipate what those needs are and to put those structures in place to allow you the time to all reach that destination. And so when it comes to, at any point along the route, you want to know something, you look at that blue dot. And that blue dot tells you you are here. And that's what the grade is, or what a communication about student progress is, from a teacher to a learner and to a family. There's the destination, right now you are here. And here's the path we're going to use to try and get you there. So that's the metaphor we try to use, and then we'll come back to it a few times, and I'll try to also tie it to reality.
So that's a beautiful frame and image for how this will go this evening as well. It's that journey and getting to the dot that informs you about where your student is. This too describes it with words, and I think you'll have your own read here. This is by Tom Alderman, and I think it sets the stage for what else we'll be talking about. Just take a minute. So we're going to talk a lot about terms. They're going to come up as we talk with you, and I'm sure by now this alphabet soup is driving all of us crazy, even those of us who use it frequently. So we'll start with a few, and these, as I said, are going to crop up pretty frequently. So when we talk about proficiencies, that is pretty synonymous with standards. And so you hear about proficiency-based learning, and you learn about standards-based learning, and those really overlap. One acronym happened to come before the other, but those are fairly synonymous. Standards that are accomplished and demonstrated through events. PBGR, all of these also end up in the law that you're going to hear about in a minute. That stands for Proficiency-Based Graduation Requirements. So what are the proficiencies? What are those standards that we hold for all of our students who are going to graduate? What are they reaching for? Personalized, of course, is kind of self-explanatory, but when you think of that in terms of learning now, and it's actually part of what we grow in our culture, it's about the learning that's planned, designed for each unique student, and takes into account strengths, interests, challenges, And those are the things that then determine a plan for a student that we will talk about later. And flexible, of course. Students have choices and options beyond and within the classroom wall regarding how they meet graduation requirements. So these are all words you're going to hear about, and hopefully that will clarify a little bit about what they mean. Jeff's going to continue with the 10 principles of
So in your
standards-based learning.
packet, you don't have those numbers, but we wanted to just point out that's there, are the 10 principles of proficiency-based learning. This is provided by Grade Schools Partnership, who's been working with the AOE, and they work with schools all over New England to help implement proficiency-based systems and personalized learning systems. So in the packet, there are a little bit further descriptions of each, and if you actually go to the webpage, there are links to the research that supports each of these principles. But what I wanted to talk about is, as you probably know, we've done quite a bit of work at CVU around standards-based learning, and what we've tried to do is kind of define it in 3 terms. That it's a process as follows. The first thing is you've got to articulate what is the learning that is going to happen for each unit of study. And then, once you've articulated that target, that destination, now you differentiate, you create the paths. And then finally, you must communicate that blue dot on a pretty regular basis to the student, to your colleagues, to the families. So I'm just going to point out 3 things in particular that might indicate shifts from some of the systems that we may have in place already. The first is these clear learning expectations. Those have to be in the language of standards. And that will be a shift because typically, particularly from the middle school and up in most situations, and certainly in high school, we've been accustomed to communicate learning through a single indicator and not tied to the language of standards. Okay? So that's one of the things that's going to demand some attention and some immediacy. And then into the differentiation angle, we've been doing a lot of work with all of these things, but certainly Act 77 emphasizes the flexible pathways. The idea that not all of these things have to take place within the confines of the classroom. Learning can take place that is rich and still allows the students multiple ways to demonstrate those standards that have been identified. And then finally, communication. And this is a little bit grade-centric here, and so it does apply to maybe some of the older ages, but traditionally, you could argue that the grades try to accomplish an awful lot of things all at once. And they were not communicating student progress on discrete skills. And instead, they were a compilation of many, many things, including habits of learning, habits of mind. And now the idea is that grades are not compensation, they're communication. They are that blue dot. And so those are the 3 things that I see as somewhat significant shifts in some of the current practices. Yep. So how does that play out in the classroom? So I tried to give that some thought because I wanted to be able to give you something a little more tangible. And so I just looked at my own practices. I used to teach English for almost 20 years here, and I started thinking about my own approach before I started using standards. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about a unit I used to do all the time. It was called the Identity Unit in English with 10th graders. And so we had an essential question. And I was asking students to understand, how does culture impact one's identity? And we were going to read House of Mondo Street by Senator Cisneros, read some poetry, some short stories. And so in this system, I would say, here's what we're going to do, you guys. We are going to read a book, we're going to read some stories, we're going to discuss the books and stories, and then we're going to write an essay about the books and stories. Okay? And then, everything you do, I'm going to grade. I'm going to grade everything you do. Okay? Because if I don't grade it, you won't do it. And then, I'm going to average all that stuff together. Everything gets a point value, I'm going to average it all together. And then, we're going to move on to another unit, I'm going to do the same thing again, and I'm going to keep piling those units on top of each other. Everything's going to be averaged together to give you one single indicator every 9 weeks that tells you, your parents, and my colleagues what kind of writer, reader, critical thinker you are, speaker, what kind of habits you have, etc. Okay? So then if you contrast that a little bit with the next one. So now, once we start using standard, what are some of the things that shift? Same title, same essential question, but now when you talk about dues, you start talking about standards. And these are 3 standards I pulled right off of the PBGR site. So these are suggested standards by the state that should be graduation standards. Okay, so these are suggested by the state, these are sample. And I just pulled 3. And then typically I do probably 3 to 5 in a year. I want people to be able to identify main supporting ideas or sources of information. I want them to be able to make a claim about it. And then I want them to be able to support the claim. And the claim will answer this question. Okay? And now we look at input and output. Learners learn through input. So they're going to read. They're going to read those things I mentioned earlier. They're going to watch video clips. They're going to listen by interviewing family members, let's say, about their legacy, about their heritage, and how it connects to their culture. And then output is they can write that essay, or they can write vignettes about their own life to show the impact of culture on their own life. They can write, they can speak, they can do a speech writer, they can do a skit, they can do make a video. So, and then the big shift is the formative summatives. I'm going to give them plenty of opportunities to practice these 3 targets throughout without grading them, but provide feedback, descriptive feedback on those tasks, so that they have this low-risk opportunity to try things, fail, pick yourself up, no punishment, move on, and then get the opportunity through summatives to demonstrate these 3 standards. And then the big change at the end is, in high school, you're still getting a single letter grade every 4 quarters, every quarter rather, but we send home a report, those who are doing standards-based learning, that would show how we got that grade by giving a discrete score for how they met this standard, how they met that standard, and how they met this standard. Okay? So that's a quick peek at how it shifts some of the things that happen in the classroom. Yeah, it's just not like that.
Tell me to walk over there. I'm going to stay here. So, to help describe this for you, we want to demonstrate how SBL, Standards-Based Learning, Proficiency-Based Learning, interweaves every layer of our educational process. And we want to start, of course, with the law, and how actually that's right up there with our legislature, and works its way through down, of course, to the student. And that is how Jeff just beautifully described the impact in the classroom. But we want to take you from the legislation down. So we're going to start with the law.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the law. I'm not sure why I get to be the one to talk about that. I think I might have volunteered for it. So there's two main pieces of the law or rule that govern standards-based learning, and that's Act 77 and then the EQS, the Education Quality Standards. And what we really want to emphasize with this, these things do give us our sense of immediacy. So this year, 7th graders will need to graduate with standards-based grading from high school. So it does govern it. We do have to do this, but we also believe that this is good instruction. This is about good learning. This isn't just about doing this because the law tells us we have to. It gives us a time frame. It gives us some parameters around our work, but the shift in instruction that Jeff's talking about is the right shift in instruction, and it is the next natural step in the work that we've been doing around standards. So it is the law that is important, but it's also good teaching and learning. So Act 77 talks a lot about flexible and personalized pathways, and here's a list of what those pathways are. So it means that we have to make sure our students have access, if they so desire, to enroll in college as a high school student and be able to gain credit that way. They need to have access to work-based learning. They need to have blended learning opportunities, virtual learning, access to career and technical education, personalized learning plans, which you'll learn more about in your local presentation as well. As they're taking these flexible pathways, they are achieving standards, they are moving towards standards. So as they're accessing these experiences, they are being supervised and supported by licensed educators who are documenting their progress. So flexible pathway doesn't necessarily mean not working rigorously towards standard. And just as a kind of wrap up, standards-based learning is a key component of achieving the requirement of Act 77 and AQS, because it's about students advancing through their education based on demonstration of skills, not just how much time they spend in the classroom.
So I want to give you a little bit of background that we referenced earlier about the learning part of this with Great Schools Partnership. And I liken this to our work with the Common Core and our work with Next Gen Science Standards, in which any large-scale initiative that Elaine referenced earlier, where you're talking some years of development, learning, and implementation. This is no different. So there's at least a year of study, and that's what we're in the midst of now, but also with the expertise and experiences that have gone on at the high school as well. And so we're deeply involved in the work with Great Schools Partnership, who are working with the AOE and have provided schools this grant, this opportunity to participate and learn deeply. As I said, there are 22 school districts, SUs involved at the table, as Elaine said, twice a month. And we are studying all kinds of topics. We also are given team time. We're the largest SU in the state, and we have the largest team at this meeting. So we fill up an entire corner of the room practically. And in the afternoons, we largely have team time in which we dive into further learning, read articles, discuss, and then think about implications for CSSU. So here are some of the topics, and I'll just take this, Jeff, since I'm standing here. These are the topics, not going to read them to you, but this isn't even all of them. But this is the kind of work we're doing. Great School Partnership brings in not only sort of, so here's what we mean by these, but here are some people who are experimenting with it. Actually, we just watched some things from Montpelier High School that referenced personalized learning plans. They have samples where things are being tried out, and we can think about what does this really look like, and what would it mean for us as we begin to implement as our whole system is involved. And they too are research specialists in this field, so they share their knowledge with us. And then there's a whole lot of exchange amongst the SUs and districts that are there. So we're doing some great and very inspired learning, I would say.
Central to the work, as Molly said, there's a significant amount of team time that happens while we're there together, and central to that work is developing kind of a 3-year implementation plan. And that plan is very much a work in progress and a very drafty plan. There were jokes around at what point it will be ready to share, and at this point we don't want to flash it because it is so much a work in progress. The plan, after our small group sort of works on it, the plan then goes to lead for further discussion and kind of debate and gathering more feedback, and then goes back to our group. There's 3 main components of the plan though. The first one is communication, and that's how do we communicate this work on various levels. This is one level of communication, is keeping you folks as a board up to speed, but it's also about community. It's about families understanding what these shifts are. It's about students. How are they going to start to understand the shifts and instruction? A very large professional development component. We are in a good situation because CBU is several years into this work, and we have a lot to learn from their experience. So that helps us in developing this plan. But there's a significant amount of professional learning that has to happen for our K-8 teachers. And reporting systems. So that is about grading. It's about shifting, as we've been talking about, shifting our understanding of what grades are for. We've started that work in K4 with our new report card, but it is continuing that work. So those are the 3 main components, and a very drafty plan.
So So what does that mean for CSSU, for us as a system, for each of our schools, and all of that building to some kind of consistency that goes to the high school? I'm actually going to skip this and go back to it, but one of the things we noticed around the table as we talk about the ingredients of an SBL, if you will, is, and try to think about our juggle with all that we're in the midst of, was to think through, so what are we in the midst of? And it happens to be, once we put it on a slide, a lot of things. So we're involved in still implementation of the Common Core. We're involved in deep study right now of next-gen science standards, and we'll just dip our toes into some unit writing about that next year and for the next several after that. We're involved in a best practices project with math pedagogy and a shift in practice across the SU, K-12. We're involved in some standards-based reporting, both K-4 at the high school and soon to be at the middle level. We're involved in each year further honing our comprehensive assessment system and what are the common assessments and how they tie into both formative and summative results that we can use to think about our progress and our work, our instruction. We have CBU's work, of course, with standards-based learning and assessing. We're involved in study and implementation of MTSS, multi-tiered system of supports, and in personalized learning plans, which you probably will hear more, about, that 7th and 9th grade students must by law have a personalized learning plan in place in the fall this coming year. So as we looked at these, we thought, holy moly, we're really involved in a lot of work. And how many of these actually are state initiatives? That's where the red star comes in. And again, to Megan's point, this is good work that the state prefaces for us and brings to everyone, but it does put this all in perspective. And so as we thought about it, back the other way. As we thought about it, we realized that our work with standards-based learning really ties many of these initiatives together. And so we came up with a Venn diagram kind of schema for us to think about, and when we go to our faculties in August with a general rollout of all of this, we're going to weave in some of these projects that are underway that help inform standards-based learning. You can't really have a deep implementation of standards-based learning without the standards. And so all of our work with the Common Core and soon to be with Next Gen will inform what we do with those standards and what are the targets that we will find. So that's critical work, and we will help our teachers understand. It's not like that lives out there in Never Never Land and now we're going to switch to SBL. These are very much integrated, as is assessment. You can't really do standards and do standards-based work without assessing and supporting students in learning for themselves where they are and also reporting that. So you can see we're right at the center of all of this work, and it's very much integrated with standards-based learning. So finally it comes down to the student, and what does it all mean for the student? And I think we're on to personalized learning here.
So as we keep saying, you're going to hear more about personalized learning plans when we break up and go into our local meetings. But this is a little bit just about what the law states, that all students, as Molly said, will in grades 7 and 9 for this coming fall of 2015 will have a personalized learning plan in place. It's going to look different this year than it probably will next year and the year after that. It's part of the learning process. We are fortunate in that each of our schools has a PLP team to be planning and thinking about implementation. We also have an SU-wide PLP committee. And in addition to that, our guidance counselors SU-wide have been meeting regularly to really look at what this is going to look like for our district, or our supervisory union. That's okay. This is part of the process, and it feeds directly into all of the great metaphors that Jeff was explaining, that our students are going to set some goals for themselves, they're going to do this work, they're going to reflect, and then they're going to keep going, and they're going to keep doing the work until they can successfully state, I met this standard, or
I know I still have some work ahead, but this is how I want to go about with my learning. And the whole idea of flexible pathways or multiple pathways provides a lot of opportunity for students to go about that in different ways, not just in a traditional classroom with a straightforward unit of study, but now we've got dual enrollment, and CBU has a great example here with Grad Challenge providing some wonderful experiences for students in their learning. Go back. So this is a fabulous video produced here that I'm going to not speak about because I think the students say it quite well themselves.
I'm not, you turn this on. There we go. Are you ready? Yeah. There you go.
My internship.
So for my internship.
So for my shadow experience.
For my grad challenge project.
So for my shadow experience, I wanted to see what the workplace was like, and it's a different environment than a school environment, and how I felt in that environment and the people there and what they did.
I wanted to, I guess, kind of broaden my knowledge.
I learned a lot about being professional in a workplace and how much a job really takes and involves.
I like hands-on learning, and I think learning outside of the classroom can be a good way to learn.
I was debating on majoring in architecture and sports marketing, and it really just gave me a broader understanding of sports marketing and what I do behind the scenes, and like what everything you don't see during the games that they actually do in preparation for them.
I thought a shadow experience would be good because I just sort of like trying new things, and I thought it might be fun.
Well, it kind of gives you a first-hand experience on where this career wanted to take place.
It would help me learn more what I wanted to do. I knew I was interested in something like medicine, and I thought a veterinarian's office might be better than going to a doctor's office because I'd get to see more.
I know what I want to do now, so that helps me a lot, and I made connections. Making connections is really important in your future.
It's really like you can like visualize what you think a shadow will be like, but once you're actually there and like in the job on a day-to-day basis, it's really different. So I think that's why a shadow is really important.
What I was looking for from a community consultant was someone who was an expert in what they were doing and would be able to help me learn a lot about a particular topic.
I guess just someone I could get along with, someone you like talking to and like spending time with.
And my advice for people who offer to have a high school student shadow them is to accept it, because you're benefiting them and helping them decide whether they want to pursue a certain career or not pursue it.
One thing I would want the community person to know is that we're all there to learn, so it's really easy to just be calm and collective and just try to teach as best you can, but also keep it minimal and upbeat.
Yeah, definitely just be more relaxed. I could tell that there was a lot of tension with me coming there because I was like a younger kid, and they wanted to make sure that I was sheltered from their kind of inner system. They didn't want me to feel like there was a lot of pressure going on, and I wanted to feel relaxed.
It was really great being there and being led around and not treated totally like a child, and they show you everything. It was really respectful.
Would you say it was worthwhile? Yeah, I would.
I'm glad I did this one. It was very enriching in knowledge.
Go for it if you have the chance. Don't miss an opportunity that could help you decide what college you want to go to, career choice wise.
Do it. It's a good experience, and you learn from it.
Go.
So, yeah, that was a good look at some of the alternate pathways to demonstrate, as you probably saw in the skills demonstration just in the video, but also demonstrate a myriad of other standards. So, to come back to the metaphor as we finish this up, we talked about setting a target that is the same for everybody, but being respectful to learners in terms of the pace on which they reach that target, the supports they may need to reach that target. And so one of our challenges now as a district is to determine what those paths are for the discrete buildings and the discrete groups and people within buildings. And so it's a monumental challenge in that regard. But I think, as you saw a few slides ago, we've done a great deal of work with NextGen and Common Core and with standards informing our instruction and our practice. And so I think we're really well poised to meet these challenges. But one of the biggest challenges right now will be to decide what are those paths to make sure we all reach that destination in the time frame that we're intending.
Great. We enclosed, and you have this in your packet, but we enclosed some resources that we rely on and will continue to. Feel free to access those. And the Great School Partnership has a fantastic website with lots of articles and information that you might enjoy. And so from there, we welcome your questions.
I don't know if this is appropriate at the local meeting, but to me, when I see it, this all seems fantastic and great. How do our teachers have enough time, and how do our students have, the schedules are so tight at K-8, where do they even fit in that time to go do it? That's what I'm wondering.
That's a great question, and our K-8s are really grappling with that as they share their plans tonight. They aren't completely figured out, but they've come a long way since our first meeting in the fall this year. So they'll be talking to you about how to do that, and that is a really tricky thing. Absolutely.
We need a 9.5-hour teacher.
Right. Extended school.
I think from what I gather from the segments, being how the high school and junior high level have a personal learning plan and all the things they want to work. I just go down to kindergarten level for this, and is it more nuanced at that level, or?
It certainly looks different for a kindergartner and different for a third grader and different for a fifth grader. It is going to evolve and certainly look differently, but on the other hand, we want students to be acclimated to this system so that as they move through, it is seamless, and it's not suddenly you arrive in ninth grade and oh my gosh, everything's different. So there will be a systemic approach to this, but how that's explained and what it looks like for a kindergartner, of course, is going to be different than it is for an older child.
But they will all have working in kindergarten sometime.
Eventually. It's going to take a while to get all this.
I got it.
So I'm just kind of curious, sort of the starting point for all this was clearly articulating what the endpoint is. How do you communicate that to a parent and student at the beginning of your work that's going to work at the end?
I think what we've really focused on is the work within the classroom of clearly identifying by units of study. So we introduce the unit of study, we'll put the learning targets up there and share those with the students, and do the kind of things that I talked about all along. A lot of formative assessments so that I get a sense of where each student is, how to alter that path, and then at the end of the unit to communicate to the student and family, here's how well they met these particular targets. Now what happens is a lot of times is that these targets are recurring targets, and so a student may say, I'm not happy with this performance, I really want to improve on this. Can I retake the summative? Can I do the relearning? And a lot of times there is an emphasis on doing some reteaching and relearning, but there's also so many times that these targets are recurring that you can say to a student, well actually, next unit we're going to be working on a lot of the same targets with a different set of content. And therefore, when you demonstrate that you've met that, that would diminish those earlier examples of you not demonstrating it, okay? And so the emphasis shifts to demonstrate meeting the target from know the content and only the content. Or the content driving the discussion about who you are as a learner.
Just from sort of a nuts and bolts standpoint, you're talking about high school kids who have transcripts that submitting to college.
Yeah.
Are you getting it sort of the point that the weighting is going to be towards that final endpoint in terms of how you reflect their?
Yeah, that's a really interesting dilemma, because as we tell all the teachers in the classroom, a big shift is to stop weighting the early performances as much as you do the later performances, and the emphasis should be on trends and recent evidence. And now you've got a 4-year transcript where what you did your freshman year is weighted the same as what you did your senior year. Traditionally, it's definitely a discussion we're going to have, but we also have to understand that there might have been things that were measured in sophomore year that don't get measured again, and thus you've got to consider the weight of that. But yes, one of the major decisions we're going to have to make is how do we tackle that recent evidence base. Yeah.
I struggle with the whole time thing, you know, maybe use your metaphor, no one drives the same speed, right? And so I was thinking about the kids who don't, at first I was thinking about the kids who don't achieve the standard by the time the teacher needs to move on to the next unit, because we are still stuck in this system we have with time, with school year, and classes and stuff. And I like the idea that, well, they'll get another chance to practice that same thing. But what about the kid who did achieve it? Now are they just practicing the same thing instead of learning something new? So
you're changing the content, and hopefully you're changing the complexity of the content as well. And when you create learning targets, you've got 2 ways you can go. You can either keep similar or the same learning targets from unit to unit, and you change the content, you change the complexity, or you change the complexity of the learning targets. And it's usually a combination of the two. Because certainly learning targets should be more complex in 9th grade than they are in 7th grade.
but you're kind of moving the goalpost for the kid who didn't get it the first time, right?
Yeah, well, there's one of the things that I did respond to that you brought up earlier is this need for intervention opportunities. Most schools, we studied a lot of them, who have gone to a standards-based system, have a time in the day where everybody is either experiencing intervention, meeting targets they were unable to meet in the last unit, or an enrichment opportunity. A chance to move from meeting the target to exceeding the target, or exceeding the target with a really cool new experience in terms of the content. So systemically, that's another piece of it. We've got to look at opportunities to be able to do the reteaching, relearning, and the enrichment.
I think that's so important, because I do worry about the fact that, I mean, we have like 96, 97, 98% graduation rate at CBU, right? So if we're setting standards that 96, 97, 98% of our kids can meet, that could be considered not a very high bar. Right, so we have to have some way to make sure that the kids who are capable of doing more than that are challenged, and the expectation is they're going to do more than normal. Like, yeah, I met the standard, woohoo.
No, I think that's fair.
What?
Average, we're all making it.
I would love to think that, but you know what I mean.
We're all making it. Yeah. We're not differentiating.
Like,
I wonder if it'd be helpful to talk about the increase in the amount of students that are able to access the college courses in high school, because they've shown that proficiency.
Yeah, I mean, once you start talking about learning a little bit differently, and students start talking about themselves as learners differently, I think they can start understanding the potential and possibilities out there, and they can speak about what they need next more articulately. I know I have 2 daughters graduate from here, both in college, and one graduates in a couple of weeks, hopefully. And another one here now, and their experiences have been pretty vastly different. And what used to happen a lot was, you know, I'd ask my daughter what kind of learner she is, and she'd say, well, I'm not very good in math, but I'm pretty good in English, I'm pretty good. And now I ask my son who's here, and he can say, input, I kill input, because I can read and I can write and I can find sources and I can understand information. My output's a real problem. I write okay, I can summarize things. It's my analysis that's a real problem. And we have completely different conversations about learning now.
I also think that it's important to remember that because this changes the picture about how we look at being proficient,
It doesn't mean that differentiation goes out the window or that we don't think about all the other ways a student can perform and exceed. These are the proficiencies, and these are the targets, and this is what we hope students will achieve, and we help them get there, and they do redo and reteach. But a core emphasis is that we differentiate for every child, hence the personalization, hence the multiple pathways, and in every way should this exemplify how we help those who are ready for more and go beyond those standards in some ways, and help those who need another opportunity. So I see it as a great blend of some of the teaching expertise we've already honed, which is differentiation, and believing in every child as a unique learner, yet with a better way to mark where they are in a truly accurate way.
And I think too, just to add to that, what standards-based learning does is reminds us that we should have that high expectation, that standard for all learners, regardless of what their path is, how much support they need to get there. And that's a shift that can revolutionize the experience for a kid coming through the system. Because it isn't about, well, we're going to change the target. We don't take that conversation lightly anymore about lowering the bar, because the bar is here. It's the standard that we want every student to access. And there are ways that we approach that conversation, even for students who have a lot of challenges in order to get there. Because high expectations, what we know is that kids realize the expectations we place on them. So if we lower the expectation, then they're going to meet our lower bar, and this really changes that.
Is there ever any consideration given to how our students are going to face their college experiences and the learning and the classroom environments in their college experience?
I can speak a little bit to it. In terms of, we've had a lot of conversations with admissions officers, and admissions officers have assured us that lots and lots and lots of schools are moving to standards to communicate learners, and they're very accustomed to understanding that. And the biggest thing your school needs to be able to do is explain how you assess students in your profile, your school profile. And they're accustomed to having homeschool kids, foreign kids, all kinds of students, and interpreting so many different transcripts. So the piece about will it put us at a disadvantage to getting into school, we're getting resounding no over and over and over again from admissions officers. In terms of preparing them for what they might experience if the experience is not a standards-based approach. Heard a great answer from Rick Wormley, who's one of the gurus of it, and somebody asked him that question, and they said, okay, maybe they will walk into college and not get the chance to have a redo, or not get the chance to practice before you have a summit. But because they had those experiences, and the learning was deeper, and because you held them accountable for meeting that bar, they are going to be much more prepared for whatever they're asked to do in that experience. And there might be a lot less need for those things. And I think that really resonated, at least with me.
Yeah, I think about grit and perseverance that clearly this system embeds. It's just an intrinsic part of standards-based learning. And that is exactly what you need when you go on to some other situation, whether it be workplace, whether it be higher ed, whatever. But really what Carol Dweck and Angela Duckworth are talking about is a different paradigm about what makes our students successful later. And it's this tenacity to redo it and get it better, get back on the bicycle when you fall off, and get that two-wheeler figured out. Whatever the experience might be that leads them to experience a really successful life later. So I think this is everything to do with being successful in a multitude of environments.
The standards we're talking about are academic standards?
Yes, although, if you want to talk.
Yeah, there are,
others.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to this. I'm trying to give you a really quick answer to this, but there are transferable standards, and those are the ones that we think appear in many, many classrooms. Things like making claims and supporting with evidence. That can happen in many, many different places. And then there are the more discipline-specific. So here's the hierarchy. Here's the transferable. This is what a graduate should look like. They should be able to do these things, demonstrate these things. And what does that look like for your content? How do making claims, what does that look like in a science classroom? How does providing a claim look like in a math classroom? And so then you define that, and that's how you start writing your learning targets. So it's more specific to your content experience. And then the other piece of that, I'm sorry, can you ask that question again? There's one more later.
The question I had was, are the standards academic
Oh,
standards?
I
And then
understand that.
the second part of the question would have been,
Well, you had trouble with the first part here. I love
Yeah,
that.
no, I forgot the third thing.
You hold on, right?
the piece was, the video had a lot about shadow experiences,
Yeah.
sort of vocational type stuff, which I couldn't quite reconcile with an academic outcome.
Yeah, I think what that was that was more of a shift into our segue into the personalized learning plan conversation that you'll be hearing in the locals. Because those are people who said, outside the classroom, I want to have a learning experience. And a big part of that is finding a professional in the field, creating some goals for myself in terms of what it is I want to learn. So really, I think we were using that as an example of the potential for showing that you can meet standards through an experience that is not confined to the classroom. But the last piece I wanted to add to the academic question is habits of learning is a question that we also have to grapple with. I think traditionally, and I was one of them as well, kind of embedded things like being on time and having your homework done and being a good participant, all factored into that one single letter grade I was given, and thus undercut the whole idea that grades are communication of what you know, can do, and understand. And so we have to really have that discussion too, is what are those are separate standards, and they should be reported separately than from academic achievement.
So
But they still should be reported. Sorry.
it's not to minimize those. I mean, those are awfully important with future success, right? Those habits of mind, those habits of learning. And they are deeply embedded in some of the work we're doing around math best practices. That's part of the premise of that pedagogy. Same thing with NGSS. There's a whole set of practice standards that have to do with habits of learning. And increasingly in the way we report out, both to students and to parents, is to have a set of those by which a student is also measured. And so a parent has access to that, as does a student who ought to be reflecting on, I never really finished a thing. There's something wrong here, and yet I really understand all this, or whatever those habits of mind are that are going to be listed there. But increasingly, that's part of a report that a student sees and thinks about, and will think about in their personal learning plan, and also parents would see. Some of this we're still kind of in the crafting, in the making of, but these are great questions to help us with that.
We have time for like one more question, is someone's got? We've only been building back up.
Just
Come on, Josh.
Well, just a comment to the comment about college admissions counselors being comfortable with this grading. I don't, there's a counterpoint to that. I think there are a lot of college admissions counselors who are very uncomfortable with this because it does change the objective class ranking aspects of this, and it's going to require more reliance on standardized testing at more competitive universities going forward, and that may be an adverse consequence of the change.
Yeah, I just know that a week ago I was at a conference where they actually read an email from the Harvard admissions officer who echoed some of the things I had said earlier. We're very comfortable with this. We're very adept at knowing what a particular grade means in each school. And so at least the feeling we've been given is that they understand how to interpret this information. That's what we're told. Yes.
Did Harvard and some of the top Ivy Leagues drop their standardized test requirements?
There are some who have, yes, there are some who have. There's also a ton of colleges in New England, because we've been working with Great Schools Partnership, who have signed a pledge to accept standards-based transcripts and to make a commitment to understanding what those things mean about learning. Yep.
A good step towards convincing the community at large, so.
Or convincing my wife.
The last wrap up, you know.
I want to say, if I could,
I just want to bring it back to Bill's question around personal learning plans and whether we'd have them in kindergarten. And, you know, Molly said absolutely, and I just want to really underscore that because I think we've missed the boat if we think that personal learning plans is the end all. What really is important is personalized learning that's represented in that. So yes, it's a lot of work, but that was a really great question, and I'm glad you asked it. I want to make sure everybody understands we are totally committed to, this is a good thing for our kids, but it's a good thing as long as it's not just a sheet that we check off and say, yeah, we did this. It is about really focusing on the student and personalizing the learning.
Okay. Well, with that, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
thank you.